But we begin with our top story. President Biden spoke with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy by phone today. This comes as the White House warns a Russian invasion could happen as soon as this week. Mr. Biden warned Russian President Vladimir Putin of the severe costs of invading Ukraine. The two leaders spoke for an hour on Saturday. The U.S. says a diplomatic solution is still open and available. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab has the latest.
Ukraine's armed forces may be small compared with Russia's, but they are mighty. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy oversaw the exercises held not far from Russian-occupied Crimea, a territory seized by Vladimir Putin 8 years ago. The U.S. is now warning of an all-out invasion of Ukraine and says there's mounting evidence that Russia is poised to attack again. This time with a multi-axis assault using ground troops, amphibious forces, airstrikes, and even ballistic missiles. But Zelenskyy says those dire warnings are doing more harm than good.
The best friend for enemies, that is panic in our country. And all this information that helps only for panic doesn't help us.
As thousands took to the streets of Kyiv, calling for peace, the U.S. quickly pulled military and other personnel out of the country, along with the U.K., Canada, Australia, and nearly a dozen other nations following suit. Russia's military buildup in the region is only growing, with enormous live-fire military drills in neighboring Belarus and Moldova. The war games are mere miles away from the thousands of NATO and allied troops in the region, in what is the largest military buildup on the continent since the Cold War. Haunted by the chaotic scramble to evacuate from Afghanistan, President Biden has vowed he will not send in troops to Ukraine to rescue trapped Americans, with the State Department urging all Americans to leave immediately.
And Imtiaz joins us now from Kyiv. It's good to see you there. So we heard Ukraine's president warning about panic. He says the people's biggest enemy is panic. What is your sense of things from the Capitol? And we also heard you reporting that there are protesters who are calling for peace. Who are they trying to appeal to?
Hey, Lana, good to talk to you. Well, yes, I'm here in the center of Kyiv. I'm on one of the main shopping plazas here in the capital city. And for a Sunday night, it's pretty lively. There's a lot of people going about their business, living their lives. Yeah, it really is. Living their lives as normal. And it really just underscores the mood here in Kyiv, is that people really want to live their lives just the way they have been. And although they're very conscious of what's being said in the news, all that diplomacy we're seeing elsewhere, they say that they feel like the Kremlin wants them to live in fear, something they absolutely refuse to do. And that's why you're seeing scenes like this, which is just busy streets here in the center of Kyiv.
Honestly, Imtiaz, it looks more lively than New York City at the moment. I want to play for our viewers a little bit that we heard on Face the Nation this morning when U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan described the types of attacks that Russia could perpetrate.
We also are watching very carefully for the possibility that there is a pretext or a false flag operation to kick off the Russian action, in which Russian intelligence services conduct some kind of attack on Russian proxy forces in eastern Ukraine or on Russian citizens and then blame it on the Ukrainians.
Imtiaz, what have you heard about a potential false flag operation?
Yeah, it's been talked about a lot, this idea that Russia could essentially stage something which they could then use as a pretext to war. So something like Ukrainian forces attacking Russian forces or something along those lines. At this stage, we can't say exactly what that is. U.S. and other Western intelligence officials haven't described what exactly they think Russia could or would do, but they are concerned of that being a very real possibility. It's also something that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is also very conscious of. In my report, you have seen that they are running drills, that the Ukrainians are running security drills, military drills, law enforcement drills, but they're relatively small compared to what we're seeing on such an enormous scale from Russia. And there's a real point to this. President Zelenskyy really wants to keep things calm here, and you're seeing it on the streets. And the reason for that is that he doesn't want to not only spook the population here in this country, he also doesn't want to harm the economy. We've already seen the local currency really devalue because of these tensions, and he's worried that if this goes on any further and there's more concern about the security and safety of this country, that it could harm his country and destabilize it even further. But to put a fine point on that, we do understand that a number of airlines are considering canceling or redirecting their flights to Ukraine. So in some ways, it's already happening.
Yeah,
Lana.
very interesting that one commercial flight that was forced to redirect already today. Let's talk a little bit more about the diplomacy that you mentioned, Imtiaz, because it is happening at a furious pace right now. German Chancellor Scholz is going to be in Kyiv on Monday, Moscow on Tuesday. President Biden speaking to Ukraine's President Zelenskyy on a regular basis in addition to today. And meanwhile, NATO allies are expressing pessimism about the ability of diplomacy to work. So what are the big sticking points that remain, and is there really still a diplomatic solution beyond just our hoping that there is one?
Look, I think everybody is desperately hoping that there is a diplomatic solution to this, and this doesn't end in a military solution or a military result, i.e. Russia launching a full-scale invasion of Ukraine because its demands haven't been met. What those demands are, Russia has made it very clear that it wants assurances that Ukraine will never join NATO and that NATO forces all along its eastern flank or western flank will scale back. That's their concern. They feel that in the post-Cold War order, that they essentially were humiliated. And more importantly, since then, NATO, this coalition of military forces, have been moving closer and closer to their borders, something they see as a threat. And Mr. Putin has made it very clear that this is a red line and that he needs to see some kind of tangible result, some sort of agreement which will ensure that this will be met. But these Western countries, these nations that belong to NATO, are saying, listen, Ukraine is a sovereign nation and it will decide its own security. And that, of course, leads us to this, essentially, this stalemate. And again, a lot of concern that if a solution isn't found soon, we could see some serious conflict.
Yeah, let's talk about that as well, because while President Biden told President Putin that he hopes that diplomacy will work, he said that he and other NATO allies are, quote, equally prepared for other scenarios. Imtiaz, lay out the consequences that are on the table beyond economic sanctions. And are economic sanctions and the hint of these other potential consequences enough to deter Putin?
I think they are. I think in his calculus, President Putin is very concerned about the kind of ways that the U.S. can essentially retaliate. And economic sanctions is one of the key components. And we have to be clear, this isn't just economic sanctions on Russia as a country, which, as we know, sanctions more often than not just hurt your average person. But this would be sanctions on Mr. Putin himself. And more importantly, the many, many oligarchs that are very close to him. These oligarchs who are billionaires, people with vast sums of money, who control huge industries. And so for them to be sanctioned and their businesses to be sanctioned, well, some argue that it would essentially lead to Mr. Putin's deck of cards, if you will, sort of falling down. And we have to remember that, Moscow economically isn't in a brilliant place to begin with. It is struggling in many ways as well. And so the threat of this kind of economic sanctions, but more importantly, this isolation globally is, of course, a concern. And we could also see other measures in place which would also harm your average Russian person, which is essentially Western countries, essentially forbidding them from traveling to their countries. And that would have a very serious effect on your average Russian who says, I'm not interested in an invasion of Ukraine. I want to live my life normally. I want to be able to go to work. I want to be able to travel. I want my currency to remain strong. I want my kids to have a future, and yet I have a president who wants to launch this, war, which many believe would be absolutely devastating. I mean, the scenario, what we've heard from, U.S. intelligence officials is horrifying. If an invasion were to be launched, this city, Kyiv, could fall within 2 days. you project over 100,000 people could be killed and up to 5 million Ukrainians could be displaced, become refugees. That, of course, is the nightmare scenario, but of course it would have huge ramifications not only for Ukraine, but many predict it would also spill over into the rest of Europe as well. So that is why so many alarm bells are ringing, so much diplomacy is going on, and of course, Lana, so much concern all around the world.
Well, thank you so much, Imtiaz, for joining us and spelling it all out. Appreciate it.